this deep dive takes us somewhere pretty personal, I think. We're going to be talking about, like, what does it mean to really search your soul, wrestle with guilt, and think about the impact you have on, like, generations to come, and all of this. It's packed into just one chapter, the Book of Enos from the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, and it's wild how this text, it's almost like reading someone's diary, you know?
Totally.
It's raw, emotional, and you get this up-close look at this one man's, like, totally intense spiritual journey.
It's true.
Yeah.
So just a little background for anyone tuning in. The Book of Mormon was first published in 1830. It basically says it's a historical record, right, of these ancient prophets who lived, get this, right here in the Americas.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're not going to get into, like, theological debates or anything like that, but knowing that background definitely helps you understand why Enos felt it was so important to write all of this down.
Oh, 100%. The when and the why are huge here, right along with the what, especially with a text like this.
For sure. So, like, who is Enos? Let's get to know this guy a little and figure out why his story even matters.
Okay, so we find out Enos is the son of Jacob and the grandson of Lehi. Now, Lehi, he's like a rock star in the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
This is the prophet who takes his whole family away from Jerusalem, and they end up, you guessed it, journeying to the Americas. So Enos is a few generations down the line from that first epic trip.
So family history is a big deal here.
It's huge.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, I'm Enos, and I come from this long line of prophets, so no pressure, right?
Exactly. Family and lineage are like the backbone of the Book of Mormon. This isn't just Enos on some personal spiritual quest. It's a chapter in this much bigger story, a multi-generational saga, which makes his emotional intensity even more, well, intense. Like, he knows the legacy writing on him, the responsibility he has to his ancestors and his children and their children. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like he's carrying the weight of his whole family's spiritual journey on his shoulders, you know?
Totally.
And that weight, it comes through so clearly right away.
Yeah.
In the dramatic opening lines of this chapter, we're talking about a prayer experience that is so powerful, so intense, it literally lasts all day, all night. Even says his voice reached the heavens. That's not your typical quiet reflection, is it?
Yeah, no, this isn't like closing your eyes and whispering your prayer before dinner. Right.
Enos is, like, in it. He describes this struggle, this almost physical struggle. He says he wrestled in prayer, that his soul hungered. And later, he talks about how his guilt was just, like, swept away. These aren't exactly, you know, laid-back, passive terms.
Not at all. This is a man grappling with some really heavy stuff, some serious internal turmoil. And it's interesting, you know, this whole image of wrestling with God, it was actually a pretty common theme back then in the religious traditions of the time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you think about Jacob wrestling with the angel in the Old Testament.
Exactly.
It's a literal physical fight, right?
Okay.
But it represents this deeper spiritual battle.
Totally. And it shows you how seriously personal faith was back then. It wasn't just about, you know, going through the motions, rituals, doctrines. It was about this raw, almost desperate struggle to really connect with something bigger than yourself.
Wow.
But there's this key difference between what happens to Jacob and what happens to Enos, right?
Yes.
Jacob. He walks away with a limp, a permanent reminder of that struggle. But Enos, he gets something totally different. He gets resolution.
Yes, he doesn't just wrestle with it all. He gets answers. Forgiveness, a blessing, like this huge weight has been lifted off. It's this powerful moment of, like, personal redemption.
Yes. And that feeling of resolution, it's crucial because it's this experience, this feeling of being heard, being forgiven, that totally changes his direction. He's not just worried about his own peace of mind anymore. This profound spiritual thing has happened, and it changes how he sees the world. It's like he's gone from looking inward to looking outward and seeing things in a whole new light.
Okay, so he's had this powerful experience, but, like, does it last? What happens when he has to leave that mountaintop moment and step back into the real world? It's like he went through this crazy internal makeover, and now he's looking around and he's seeing things in a whole new way.
Exactly. And what he's seeing, it's like the bigger picture, you know, and this is where this whole idea of a covenant comes in. Basically, the sacred promise between God and his people. It's huge in the Book of Mormon, like really huge. And Enos, he sees himself as part of this long, unbroken chain of believers, all bound by this agreement that goes back generations. And it just consumes him, this feeling of responsibility, not just for himself, but for, like, the spiritual well-being of his kids, his grandkids, his great-great-great-grandkids, people he's never even going to meet.
Wow, that's intense. It's incredible how he goes from this super personal internal battle to this, like, almost overwhelming feeling of, I don't know, duty to others. And he's especially worried about the Lamanites, right?
Right.
Talks about them, their lifestyle, how different they are from his own people, the Nephites. And for anyone listening, these were the two main groups descended from Lehi's family. And let's just say they had a history.
That's putting it mildly. And Enos, he knows this conflict, this rift between them. It could be devastating. He's scared that everything his people have stood for, their history, their beliefs, it could all just disappear.
And so he's got to do something to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And that's where this desperate need to keep a record comes in.
Totally.
It's like he's writing for the future, hoping that someday someone will find what he wrote and learn from it.
And that's where things get really interesting because, the Book of Mormon, it claims to be that record, hidden away for centuries, just waiting to be discovered. So Enos' story, it's like this fascinating thread in a much bigger story about faith, family, and the power of these ancient promises. He's adding his voice to this chorus that echoes across generations.
Wow. It really makes you think about how connected we are to the past and how much we want to believe that what we do, what we believe in, it'll matter in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though the chapter just kind of ends, we never find out what happens to Enos. The text makes a point of saying that what he wrote, it survived. For Enos, that's what mattered.
His story, his struggles, his faith, it all became part of something so much bigger than himself. And it makes you wonder if you can make sure just one thing about your life, your beliefs, something you knew was saved for future generations, what would it be? Something to think about.
That's all the time we have for today, but thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Until next time.